Met my buddy Amanda Anderson. She's that pretty young lady with the long brown hair back there. She's one of my West Nashville kids over in the Nations that we picked up a long time ago to go to church with us. And I remember her granny used to make her some pretty little dresses, and she'd wear them to church and stuff. But we're glad Amanda and her family's here. But so tonight's our last night on the topic of sex. And we're going to get back into Matthew next week. But I want to start off because preachers are, we do a lot of sermons. We do a lot of classes. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've had some good sermons, and I've had some really bad ones. I've had some that have actually stunk, and I mean some really bad ones, really horrible ones. I think back at some of my sermons, man, I've been embarrassed by some. One of them that I really was embarrassed by had one titled, How to Work Your Way to Heaven, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, and I look back at that like, did I really preach that? And I actually believed that you had to do things to impress God to get to heaven. I was like, wow. But I heard this story of this preacher and his wife, and on the wedding night, his wife said, I want you to promise me something, that you will never look in the bottom drawer of my night bedstand over there by the bed. Don't never look at that little nightstand. Don't ever look in that bottom drawer. And so he did it for 27 years. He preached and he taught classes, and he never looked in that bottom drawer of the nightstand. And then finally, after 27 years, one day she was out of the house, and he said, I've got to look in that bed. I got to look in that drawer. I want to see what's in there. And he opened it, and there were 6 eggs and over $500. And he was just curious. He just had no idea what that was. And so he decided that he was going to talk to his wife that night. He said, honey, I just want to let you know, you're going to have to forgive me. I looked in that drawer, and I'm sorry you asked me not to, but I just had to see it. And he said, I saw 6 eggs and $500. Well, what's that for? And she said, well, every time you preached a bad sermon or a bad class, I put an egg in that drawer from our own chickens. And he said, whoa, only 6 eggs? He said, that's pretty good for 27 years. He said, but what's the $500 for? And she said, well, every time I get a dozen eggs, I sell them. So tonight might be one of them sermons, might be one of them classes. This is going to be a tough one. It's the very last one, and we're going to talk about 2 words that we probably have never really mentioned much in the church: lust and pornography. That's not mentioned a lot from our pulpits. So we're going to do the best we can with it. Now, I'm not naive to think that the people that are in this room have pure minds and pure hearts, because I know that ain't true. I can look at some of y'all and I can see the devil in you. But you and I both know that people in our church, not just our church, but people in church, struggle with lust and pornography. That is a fact. And it's not just guys or girls. It's not just guys. It's guys and girls. And it's not just teenagers. A lot of times we think it's just only for teenage boys or middle school boys. I mean, we struggle with it. I know for me, it's a struggle for me. I will be at home, and if you're on social media, if you're on the computer, if you're on the internet a lot, things will pop up, ads will pop up, things will be sent to you, and it's stuff comes in your email, and you get flooded by this stuff, and it is a fight. It's a battle. And I think I told y'all this a few weeks ago. I remember vividly my very first time seeing pornography. I remember it. I remember going across the street to the junkyard. I remember when I was growing up, and we would look in those cars, and we would try to find things that we could steal and take back. And I remember as a little boy going in one of them old junk cars, and there it was. Some magazines, specifically in my specific situation, it was a Penthouse magazine. And I remember picking it up, And I remember feeling the rush at looking at something that I knew that I wasn't supposed to look at. I knew it was dirty and nasty, but I could not stop looking at that. I remember putting the magazine back in the car, going back home, and then I remember going right back to that car, finding that magazine, taking it back to my house and hiding it. And the battle was on. And I've been fighting that battle. I'm a 50-year-old man, married. I've been fighting that battle for decades. I'm not the only one. I promise you, I know that there are men and women in our church that are tempted by this. So I'll just open it up for just kind of a discussion real quick. What is it about sexual sin, lust, pornography? What is it that is so tempting, that grabs us so quickly and so deeply? Why is that so tempting to us? If you got an answer, raise your hand. It's human nature, Mike? Yeah, it's human nature. There's something about it. You know, something deep down inside of us. I mean, we're created as sexual creatures, as beings. You know, God created man and woman, and one of the things he told us to do is to go be fruitful and multiply. I mean, it's from the get-go, you know, and so, yeah, it's part of our human nature to do that. We're sexual beings. God gave us sexual organs and feelings and different ways of looking at things, and yeah. I'm saying.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, Coach.
Well, women are beautiful. To a man, women are beautiful.
Yeah, women are beautiful.
I spent a whole lifetime in locker rooms and everything. Men are not beautiful. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's you know, for a guy, that was created by God, and I understand that.
Sure.
It was.
Yeah.
You can't do better than that. You can't do better than that.
Yeah. So, hey, Coach is being straight up with us here.
I'm sitting next to my mom.
Yeah, Coach is right. Women are beautiful. God made women to be beautiful, you know? And you know, like Coach said, he's been in a lot of locker rooms. Men aren't the best to look at, you know? We're just not, bless our hearts. But yeah, and that is part of our human nature. It's part of the way God created things, you know? Part of the way we do. I know, you know, and a lot of times we make things really simple. We say that men are visually stimulated and women are more touch stimulated. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But I know for a fact that I, as a man, without a doubt, I am visually stimulated. I really am. Just like you said, Coach, it is a struggle. Anybody else? Why is this such a difficult temptation? It's forbidden? Yeah, absolutely, Don. It's forbidden. Like we're not supposed to do it. You know? It is easy to hide. It's really easy to hide now. I remember back in the day, the only way that you could get a hold of it is if you went to a gas station and you had to go to the magazine rack, you know, and you wanted to make sure no one was looking, or you went to that video store and you had to go to the back room or whatever, or you know. But today, oh no, I'm telling you what, anytime, anywhere, and I don't have to pay a nickel for it. I can get to it, and it's really, really tearing up our kids. But it's tough. But I do know that you can be free from this temptation. I know that you can be free from this addiction. Here's some statistics about lust and pornography. This is from a survey. It says 57 people have watched pornography in the last month. 57%. I think that might be a little low. 64% Christian men look at pornography once a month. 15% of Christian women look at it once a month. 1 in 5 youth ministers struggle with pornography. 1 in 7 senior ministers, preachers, pulpit ministers, pastors struggle with pornography and lust. Comes up to over 50,000 Christian leaders in just America alone. 69% of pastors say that porn has affected their church, that people in their church struggle with it. It's difficult. But yet this is one of those sins that nobody wants to confess. Nobody wants to talk about it. I mean, honestly, when was the last time that someone came up to you privately and said, "Can you pray for me? I am struggling with looking at pornography"? I mean, think about that. I mean, I could count maybe on one hand the number of times that has happened to me. Someone has just come up to me out of the blue and has said that. I mean, it's one of those things, it takes deep relationships with someone, a deep friendship with somebody that can confess that. And even then, you know, I'm not so sure about. Even then, I don't really want to talk about it. Even then, it's just difficult. And I think it's because it's I don't know, there's some shame attached to it. I don't want to admit that. I've got no problem. It's easy for me to say, you know what, I'm a hothead. I lose my temper, I blow up, I say things I shouldn't say. That's an easy thing to confess. Or you know what, I struggle with greed. I struggle with greed, or I struggle with envy. But I mean, if I got up here and said stuff like I struggle with lust or pornography, I mean, that's a whole different sin to confess. I mean, it's hard to talk about this stuff. So I want to talk about 3 questions tonight, and then we'll be done. We'll be done a little early tonight, which I know you probably think, wow, that's great, but I'll make it up Sunday. So what do we need to know? Just a couple of things about what we need to know. 1 Corinthians 6, Paul says this: "I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything." So what do we need to know? One thing, not everything is beneficial. What do you think that means? I mean, it says there in the text that I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I can do anything that I want to do. Okay? There ain't nobody going to stop me from doing whatever I want to do. I can do any dadgum thing that I want to do. You're not going to stop me, Mike. You ain't going to stop me. If I want to lie, cuss, cheat, and steal, I'm going to do it, and there ain't a doggone thing you can do about it. All right? I want you to know that, straight up. I can do anything I want to do. But not everything is beneficial. If you were telling your kids and explaining this verse to them, how would you explain this verse to them? You were talking to your middle school kid and they said, "Mom, I don't understand this. What's this mean?" How would you explain it to them?
Just because everybody's doing it.
Go ahead and say that.
Because everybody's doing it and going to jump off the bridge doesn't mean you can do it too.
Okay. Just because everybody's doing it, you shouldn't do it. Okay. Anybody else?
Guy's perspective, you're thinking about
Take this, Coach.
Cherry pie, you know, hey, I'm going to eat all the cherry pie I can, but I might weigh 300 pounds by the time I get.
Right.
It's good stuff.
Oh, it's good, but yeah, I can't eat I cannot eat like a pig and get away with it. It's eventually going to catch up to me. Anybody else? How would you describe this to your kids? I can do anything I want to, but not everything is beneficial. Steve?
Yeah, but I mean, sure, I can do whatever I want, but there's consequences to those things that I do that are not good.
Yeah.
And that's the consequence, you know. Positive action has positive consequences. Negative actions have negative consequences. And that's what, I mean, as a human, now as a child of God, I don't do everything I can. I can do it, but I don't do it because I know God says it's not good for me.
So let's stay with lust and pornography on this. I want you to think about this. I can do anything I want to do, but not everything is beneficial. Is porn beneficial? All right, come on up here, brother. I don't know what you're doing. You're not going to throw that at me, are you? Yeah. So I want you to think about this. If you are someone that looks at pornography in your home, what's the problem? Listen to me. I'm going to read you some things. I want you to think about this. A lot of people think it's not a big deal. They actually think it's a positive thing. They say that pornography or lust relieves stress and it's okay, that it's a private thing. There's no reason to get up in arms about it. It doesn't harm anybody. So why make such a big fuss about it? I'm doing it in my own house, in my own room. I'm not paying for it. I'm not wasting any money. Nobody knows about it. It's just me and the computer screen. No one has to know. Okay. Well, it relieves stress, Mike. Okay. Okay, the drug addicts will say that. All right, well then let me ask you a different way. Why isn't pornography beneficial? What are the harms of pornography? Okay, you can't have a relationship with a computer screen. Okay, so it'll affect your relationship with your girlfriend, with your wife. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that confession. We'll take that as a confession, Coach. I'm glad I didn't give him the microphone, Dan. But thank you. I'm sure. Wow, I don't even know what to say about that. It does affect your relationship, doesn't it? Why else is it not beneficial? Who? Can you say that again, Stacy? Yeah.
That is somebody's spouse or child that you're looking at. That's somebody's daughter. That should play into your head, I would think.
Yeah. That you're victimizing this person. You know, it is when you begin to think about it that this young lady or this young man that you're looking at was somebody's child. At some point, this person was a child. At some point, for some reason, this person got into this business. And it is horrible, terrible what you're doing to this person. Here are some things that I've got down. If pornography consumption is truly beneficial, then what do you do with 80% of the pornography films that include verbal aggression? 88% of it. 55% of pornography films include physical aggression. It's not beneficial at all. Here's something else. If pornography consumption is truly beneficial, and if it leads to feelings of loneliness, social embarrassment, insecurity, self-disgust, impairment of sexual arousal, diminished trust, unrealistic expectations of relationships, and body image issues, why do you keep doing that? Because you're right, Kevin. As a man that's married, if I'm completely inflamed with lust and pornography, it is going to affect my marriage in a significant way. Then you think about this. I don't know if you realize this, that pornography is a $3.3 billion industry. Here's an interesting statistic for you. 26,258 viewers every second watch pornography. And we treat people, like Stacy was saying, as some type of sexual commodities. If porn consumption is really beneficial, what do you do about those situations in those films where women, and I'm sorry for the graphic nature of this, we're just going to say it like this. What do you do with women who are spit on and beaten and slapped and choked for the gratifications of others? It's not beneficial at all. There's nothing positive about it. Here's the second thing. If I say that it's not beneficial, I'll also say this, that I will not be mastered by anything. Yep, Dan.
I think part of the problem is societal standards are being eroded every day. Think about some of the movies that have come out in recent history. Magic Mike, 50 Shades of Grey. Now, I haven't seen either one of those, but I know I've talked to people that have. Those are, in my mind, akin to, I guess, kind of cleaned up pornography, but those are things that we start to accept in society, you know, as Christians, just as a society. And I think that even commercials, everything has become sexualized. And I think that's why it just becomes more and more difficult, especially for this generation that's coming up, to be able to have any kind of defense against that. You know, It's kind of like the frog in the pot. You put the frog in the cold water, you turn the flame on, it slowly heats up, and that frog gets boiled. And ultimately, what does it lead to? It leads to destruction.
It does.
And so I think that we need to be on guard about movies like the ones that I just listed and just put our foot down. I mean, we don't have to go see those. There's plenty of entertainment out there without us lowering our standards and legitimizing mainstream pornography that way. So it's not just in the secret of your own home, you know, in your own closet. We can put out a bad influence by going to those types of movies and letting people think that that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I mean, our world has changed the way it's, but y'all know this, that these two words, sex sells. It does. It always has, and it always will. I mean, it just does. Go ahead, Gina, and then we're going to get back to this.
Well, you know, you talk about just look as simple as looking at a magazine. Okay, so when that gets boring and gets old, you go to the next step.
Right.
Keep on going and going. And then some people don't know when to stop. It's like eating a chocolate cake. You don't know how to stop if you're addicted to that. So then it leads on and on and on until hopefully it doesn't manifest to real life situations where you end up hurting someone physically, mentally,
Sure.
and emotionally.
You know-
So it's a stair step. It just builds.
Right. I know scientifically or biologically they talk about dopamine being released in your brain when you look at this, and you get dopamine released, and you look at it some more, and then more dopamine is released, and it just keeps going, it keeps building, it becomes addictive. But have you ever thought about the other side of the coin? Not the people who watch it, but what about the people that are actually involved in the industry? I don't know if y'all were here a few years ago when we had that young lady that was a former porn star, adult film star that was here, and she talked about the horrible, terrible things that happened to her life, and not just her, but the way she also got young ladies involved in the industry, and it just kept building and building. So the New York Times had an article that came out a couple years ago, and it said this, the title was this: "Jobless, selling nudes online and still struggling." New York Times had an article about these young ladies that had a full-time job but were unable to make ends meet. And so they got their own OnlyFans site where they would publish nude pictures or videos, and people would subscribe to this service, And these ladies would keep putting up pictures every single day to try to raise money, to try to make ends meet, to try to do that, to try to pay bills and rent and utilities and food costs. And these women are trapped in this situation. How do I get out of it? Here's what one lady said. Said, it's a full-time job on top of your other full-time job looking for work. Fans want to see you posting daily. You're always churning. You're always taking pictures and videos to post. This ought to break our heart that this young lady, and not just her, but thousands, if not millions of these young people will do anything to make ends meet. And her customers are like animals, always needing more. And she's enslaved, and so is her customer. But Paul says, I will not be mastered by anything. And sex is one of the biggest masters in our society. Third thing. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 6. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ himself? Shall I then take the members of Christ and unite them with a prostitute? Never. Do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? For it is said, the two will become one flesh, but whoever is united with the Lord is one with him in spirit. So the third point is this, is that you do not profane Christ's body. Paul is saying you do not join Christ's body with something unholy. You don't mix Jesus with something immoral. You don't put the Son of God and you connect it to something that's sexual. That's what Paul is saying. Your body belongs to Christ. That if you want to have a porn-free community, that you think about your body as something that you've got to take care of, that not everything is beneficial, that I will not be mastered by anything, and that Christ's body, the body that I have, should not be profaned. Second question, what do we need to feel? What do we need to feel? Paul continues. It says, flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you've received from God? You were not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. I think there's two interesting words that pop up here. You see those words, flee and honor. Paul talks about fleeing. That's flee means get out of Dodge, leave, that you flee from sexual immorality, that you leave it, that you run away from it. You know, and a lot of times, you know, when we deal with this sexual sin, the lust and the pornography, a lot of times in the church we say, well, it's not that big of a deal. Boys will be boys, right? Paul says, no. It's not boys will be boys. You run. You flee. You get out of Dodge. It's not you'll be okay next time or chin up or you'll be okay. No. Paul says you run. Run from it. Then he also says you honor. You honor your body. That you're made in God's image. That young lady, that person that's trapped in that OnlyFans website who is having to constantly, every day, put pictures and videos of themselves so they can satisfy the appetites of their customer, that person, that young lady or that young man is destroying their lives. And those people that are addicted to it just continue to dishonor their bodies and the bodies around them. I don't know if you remember Queen Elizabeth, her funeral service, how they took care of her body, how it was honored, how it was such a big deal, how she was dressed in the finest clothes that she had, and they took care of her casket and her funeral. And at her funeral service, at Queen Elizabeth's funeral, there were no jokes. There were no crass comments. There was nothing about her. It was a very important thing. They wanted to honor the Queen's body. And we ought to be able to honor the fact that we have a king's body, that we're made in the image of God. And that all of these women and these men that are doing these terrible things to themselves on these websites, your body deserves the same treatment. You don't deserve the desecration of a 1 o'clock in the morning pornography binge on the computer. You deserve more. A lot more. In fact, here are some passages. I'm not going to read all of them, but if you get a chance, you can look at them tonight. Here's what God says about us. In 1 Corinthians, he calls us a saint, that we're saints. 2 Corinthians says that we're a new creation, that the old is gone. Ephesians 2 says that we're God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works. John chapter 1 says that we're a child of God, and that all people are a child of God. John 15, Jesus calls us a friend of God. Romans chapter 8 says that we're co-heirs of inheritance with Christ. Genesis chapter 1 says that we're all made in the image of God. That's who we are. That's our identity. It's not pictures and videos for a website. People aren't created for me to go look at them. And I'm not trying to browbeat anybody because I'm a man that I struggle with things, just like all of you do. So last question, and we'll be almost done. So what do we need to do? If you struggle with this sin, what do you need to do? If your kid struggles with it, if your grandchild struggles with it, if you have a family member, if you've got a friend, a coworker, what do you need to do? Well, first, bring it into the light. Now, I'll tell you this. I'm a knucklehead, but I'm not foolish enough to know that I'm going to just walk up to anybody and confess my sins. There are a few people in my life that I trust dearly that I can talk to. Some of them are sitting in this room. There's a lot of men in here, because I would never, ever confess this to a woman, but there are some men in this room that I know that if I struggled with this, I could go to and I could say, hey, I am really having a hard time with this. Can you please pray for me? I know I could. I know for one, I know I could go to Coach Keaton and do that. We've got to bring things in the light. And part of the reason we run to porn is because we feel broken inside or lonely or insecure or unlovable or unwanted or overburdened by the stress of life, or we're weighed down by negative emotions, or we're inadequate. But part of the path of healing comes through good Christian mature relationships with one another. I mean, who can really know you? Is there anybody in your life that you can really say, this person fully knows me? I mean, is there anybody? Is there anybody in your life that you know that would love you if they knew everything that you did? I hope so. If there isn't somebody, that's a problem. I hope we have relationships like that at Western Hills. I really do. If we're a church and we can't go to one another, those close relationships, and bring things into the light, we've got a problem. But you might be sitting here and thinking, you know what? I don't struggle with pornography. This isn't my thing. David, I hear what you're saying. I agree with you, but I don't struggle with it. Well, here's my encouragement. Here's my encouragement to you. If you know someone is struggling with it, if you've got a friend, you need to make sure that you're the type of person that can bear one another's burdens. I've got 3 boys in my house. Do you think at any time in those 3 boys' lives, do you think any 3 of them have struggled with this? I mean, do you want me to stand up here and lie to you and say my 3 boys are as pure as a white-driven snow? They're not. They're not. They're 3 young men. And I hope that I've got a good relationship with them where I can go as their dad and say, hey, I love you. How are you doing? I hope they can come and talk to me about that. I hope we have people like that in our church that we can do that. And I know you've got to have some relationship equity that's built up. It takes some time, but I know this, we've got to bring it into the light. I know, secondly, you got to get accountable. If you are struggling with this, you got to get accountable. And that's kind of a big word, because a lot of times we wonder, what does it mean to be accountable? And there's 2 ways to be accountable. There's this thing called post-accountability. Like if I were to fall into a lustful situation or something with sexual sin, I need to go to somebody and confess when I mess up, when I fall down. And that's good because you bring things into light. You can receive mercy and love and forgiveness and support and care and concern. So there's post-accountability. But what about pre-accountability? What about being accountable before it gets to that point? For those of you who know much about me, I went to rehab for 6 months back in 1996, and it was a tough time in my life, but I learned a few things. I still struggle putting this into practice. Here's what it means to be pre-accountable. One is to have a vision. Who do I want to be like? Like Dan was talking about the way the world is today. Who do I want to be like? I don't want to be like the world. I want to be like Christ. So I have to have this vision of who I want to be like. And then secondly, I've got to have this intention. How am I going to get there? If I want to be like Jesus, how can I intentionally make that happen? And then third, I've got to have the means to do it. I've got to be able to actually put this into practice. That I've got to have disciplines. And then I've got to do it with the Holy Spirit's help. And then finally, I've got to have community. I've got to have people around me. I've got to enlist others in this accountability plan. There is a group of men that meet here on Sunday mornings at 7:30 every other Sunday in my office. It's an accountability group. We don't study the Bible. We don't have doctrine or theology in there. We get together as a group of men at 7:30 in my office, and we just confess. We confess sin. And it's tough. But you got to have it. So if you were to apply this to your life, and maybe you're thinking, I'm not quite sure how this looks, but if you're a football fan or a sports fan, think about it this way. Football team, the goal is to win a championship, go to the Super Bowl, whatever it is, do whatever you want to do, but that's the goal. The goal is to have the vision. The vision is to win. Then you got to have the intent to achieve it. You got to say, you know what, I'm going to do whatever it takes to do this. Well, then I've got to have the means. That means I'm going to bust my butt. I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to go to practice. I'm going to do everything that my coach says. I've got the means to do this. I'm going to do it. Then I've got my community. I got my football team that's on my tail. I got the dude that's on the line says, hey, did you lift your weights today? Did you go running? Did you do this? Did you do that? And all those things will help you in a football game. All those things will help us to deal with lust and pornography and sin. Vision, intention, means, community, pre-accountability. And then finally, this. Do some interior design. If you struggle with lust and pornography, you may have to make sure that your computer is not in a closed room. Our computer, the one computer that we have at our house, the only one, is in our front room by a bay window that overlooks the street in our neighborhood. Believe me, you don't want to do anything on that computer in front of the bay window in the little town of Fairview. Okay? I'm telling you, if something happens, they're going to be talking about it at Hardee's the next day. Maybe you got to do that. Maybe you got to download different apps, like there's an app called Covenant Eyes that you have, and that you download this app called Covenant Eyes, and you're in a covenant relationship with somebody, and everything that's on my screen, there are 4 people in this church that can see it. And it's embarrassing sometimes. But it's not just embarrassing for me, it's embarrassing for them. Because they see what I'm looking at, and I also see what they're looking at. It's embarrassing. Sometimes embarrassment is an okay motivation. Amen? So you do what you need to do some interior design. But what if you do sin? What if you do fall? What if it is a struggle? I'll close with this. This is a famous painting by Rembrandt. It's about a parable that Jesus told. Does anybody know what that parable would be? The prodigal son. So, Dan, can you hit the lights for me? We might be able to see it a little bit better. I don't know. Okay. So Rembrandt makes this painting of the prodigal son. You can see who the prodigal son is. He's the one that's kneeling. If you don't know the story of the prodigal son, remember he was the younger brother that asked his dad for all of the inheritance, and then he went away and he spent all of his money on all kinds of things. One of the things it says in the text, he spent his money on prostitutes. Spent his money on prostitutes. He eventually ended up in a pig pen, eating pig food. And he decided to come back to his dad. And so he did come back to his dad, not knowing what would happen. He was willing to be a slave or a servant in his dad's household. And he gets to his dad, and in this painting you can see that his clothes is ragged. He has no shoes on his feet. And don't know if you realize this or not, but his head has been shaved. It's a sign of his immorality. He was poor, he was homeless, and he was sinful and a rebel. And he came back. And so his dad greets him. And you can't see this, but in the top left-hand corner, there's this figure. You can barely make it out. It's a figure of a woman in the top left-hand corner, which probably represents his mother that's watching the scene. Over here to the right, the gentleman that's standing up with his arms crossed is probably his older brother, looking down on his brother coming back. And then the dad. Anything you notice about the dad? Anything jumps out at you? He's wearing a red robe, a cloak, which for Rembrandt, he said, that symbolized the scarlet blood of Jesus, the forgiveness that was being offered to his son. The second thing that you might notice are the hands of the dad. There's a hand that looks very masculine. think that's the one that would be on your, I think, on this side, on your right side. And on the left side is a hand that's not quite as masculine. It says in that painting that Rembrandt was using this to symbolize both sides of the love of a dad. One that's a little bit hard, one that's a little bit challenging, and the other hand that's a little bit soft and kind and compassionate. Both loves are needed at the same time, aren't they? There are times in my life that I need the hard, rough, rugged hand of God, the disciplining hand, the hand that says, David, you shouldn't have done that. You've messed up. Stop it. Then I need that kind, soft, loving, warm hand that says, David, it's going to be okay. I love you. So for those of us who are struggling with this sin, God says, stop doing this. Flee from it. But I forgive you. For those of us who have children, or a spouse, or a friend that's dealing with this, we must have that hard love that says, you better stop. You're hurting me. Like Kevin said, you're hurting our relationship. But then you also have to say, but I love you. Let me help you. It's tough to do that at the same time, but it's necessary. Let's pray. God, we love you, and Father, sexual sin is rampant in our world. Not just with lust and pornography, but divorce, with adultery, with homosexuality, with the young men and women that are struggling with transitioning and transgender issues. God, it's everywhere. And this world is just filling it up, Father. It's just image after image after image, video after video after video, God. We're bombarded by this every day. And God, I know that our children are bombarded with this almost every minute of every day, God, whether it's through social media or text or discussions and conversations at school, or they hear it in their music, or they watch it on videos, or all the TV shows that's filled with garbage. God, I just pray that you help all of us, Father, to love you, to honor you with our body, Father, to chase after you, God. And if we're struggling with this, God, help us to flee from it. Help us to honor our God-given image of God body, Father. Lord, you're so good to us, but God, you want us to stop doing this stuff. Help us as a church to be kind and warm and inviting and loving, but God, help us as a church to know when to stand for truth, when to preach it, when to teach it, and how to practice it. We love you, and we thank you for forgiveness.